Snow fell early in Seattle that year, coming down in early November. It lay on the branches of the arborvitae outside my window in heavy, wet layers. And every time I looked at it, a dull, deep ache settled into my joints. I had turned 70. At that age, most of my peers were discussing new blood pressure medications, planning Alaska cruises, or debating whose grandson played better baseball. I sat in my armchair with a fleece blanket over my knees, holding a cup of cooling tea, staring out at a pale gray sky that seemed stretched over Washington like a ceiling. My house had been on the market for 2 months. When the realtor finally called to say a buyer was willing to pay the asking price without extra conditions, I felt neither joy nor sadness, just a quiet click inside, as if a gear in a vast mechanism had finally locked into place. My entire 60-year life in America fit into a few boxes of documents, a couple of suitcases of clothes, and a small wooden chest my father had brought back from Southeast Asia in 1964. I was a 10-year-old boy when my parents took me away from Manila. My father worked there as an engineer for an American construction firm rebuilding infrastructure after the war. My childhood memories of the Philippines were not tied to maps, history, or politics. It was pure sensory experience. The deafening roar of tropical rain beating on the corrugated tin roof of our home in Malate, the sweet, heavy scent of blooming sampaguita in the evenings, the juicy taste of ripe mango running down my elbows as I sat on a stone wall with local boys. Then my father got a promotion, and we were plucked from that humid, vibrant, blossoming paradise and dropped into a sterile, neat, and endlessly cold Chicago suburb. 70 is a strange milestone. The children have grown up and moved across different states, living their own lives with their own Sunday phone calls that grow shorter every year. My wife, Sarah, passed away from cancer 5 years ago. At a certain point, I caught myself realizing I was merely existing, making the bed, mowing the lawn, paying bills, watching the evening news, and waiting for the calendar pages to turn. That was when I pulled the old black and white photo album out of the wooden chest. In one photo, I stood in short pants beside a bamboo jeepney, grinning ear to ear, with majestic palms towering behind me into the blinding sun. Getting the SRRV retirement visa took a few months. The paperwork didn't discourage me. On the contrary, the bureaucracy brought back the feeling that I was doing something meaningful, perhaps the most important decision of my fading life. My friends at the golf club thought I had lost my mind. "John, you're 70. Where are you going?" "Typhoons, crime, heat, unfamiliar healthcare." I just smiled. What they didn't understand was that America had become the unfamiliar place for me. Its sterility, its endless rat race, its freezing winters, and the isolation within four walls. The flight from Seattle to Tokyo to Manila took nearly 24 hours. When the Boeing's wheels finally touched down on the runway at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, my heart pounded faster than it had in 20 years. Stepping out of the jet bridge into the terminal, I caught it even through the heavy air conditioning, that distinct, unmistakable air of the Philippines, air thick with moisture, carrying notes of ocean salt, tropical flowers, exhaust fumes, and roasted coconut oil. Stepping outside into the taxi zone, I froze. Heavy breathing, a scorching sun, sun-baked asphalt, and an incredible, deafening chaos of sounds. Car horns, calling tricycle drivers, laughter, loud music booming from speakers. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The heat settled over me like a heavy, wet blanket. But instead of fatigue, I felt my lungs expand. An elderly taxi driver, a lean Filipino with silver stubble and kind wrinkles around his eyes, helped load my suitcases into the trunk. "Welcome to Manila, sir," he smiled, flashing bright white teeth. "First time in the Philippines?" I looked at him, smiled back, and spoke a word I hadn't uttered out loud in more than half a century, though I had kept it in the quietest corner of my memory. "Not quite, my friend. I've come back home." The taxi pulled out, merging into the endless river of Manila traffic. Outside, ultra-modern Makati skyscrapers blurred into poor neighborhoods, bamboo overhangs, colorful graffiti, and endless palm trees. I looked at this churning ocean of life and knew that there was no going back. I hadn't come here to die. I had come to try and live again. My first few weeks in Manila were a trial of endurance and, at the same time, a plunge into a long-forgotten dream. I decided to stay at a hotel near the Ermita district to try and locate the house where I spent my childhood. Stepping onto the streets of my past, I quickly realized that the old Manila of the 1960s no longer existed. In place of cozy wooden villas with sprawling verandas, concrete condominium monsters had grown. Narrow lanes had turned into gridlocked arteries, and quiet had permanently surrendered to the roar of engines and the endless hum of human voices. I walked along the scorching asphalt, leaning on my cane. My joints were still protesting the sudden climate shift, searching for any landmark. The Catholic church my mother used to take me to was still standing, but its ancient walls were now squeezed between a parking lot and a shopping mall. Yet, despite these physical changes, the spirit of the place remained. It lived in the people. In America, an old person often becomes invisible. Society quietly pushes you to the margins. You move slowly in the checkout line. You fumble for your keys. You can't keep up with the rhythm of the young. Here in the Philippines, my old age was greeted very differently. The culture of respect for elders, pagmamano, permeated every single day. Every time I stopped at a street stall to buy water, the young vendor would call me sir or lolo, grandfather, with such genuine warmth and deference that it took my breath away. People gave up their seats for me everywhere, helped me cross the street, and strangers struck up conversations asking where I was from and if I liked their country. After a month in the capital, I realized that noisy, smoky, sleepless Manila was a wonderful memory, but not where I wanted to live permanently at 70. I needed quiet, the sea, and a piece of land where I could sink my final roots. I headed south to the island of Cebu, and from there to a small coastal area near Dumaguete. They don't call it the city of gentle people for nothing. Its cheerful, unhurried pace was perfect for settling down. I rented a small, low-slung, white stone house with a roof made of nipa palm leaves, located just 100 yards from a beach of dark volcanic sand. Adapting to local daily life required patience that I, accustomed to Western comforts, initially lacked. Filipino time is a concept every foreigner must make peace with. If an electrician says he will come tomorrow morning, it means he might show up next Thursday, or perhaps not at all because his third cousin had a birthday, and missing a family celebration would be disrespectful. My front door wouldn't close flush. Power outages during thunderstorms were routine, and small house geckos, known locally as tuco, frequently appeared in the bathroom. At first, I felt annoyed. I caught myself slipping into the mindset of a typical American retiree. What am I paying for? Where is the service? Why is everything so slow? But one evening, sitting on my veranda during a blackout, I looked up at the sky. In the US, light pollution and smog had long made me forget what stars looked like. Here over the ocean, the Milky Way spilled out in a brilliant, dense haze. The surf hummed softly, cicadas chirped in the dark, and the air smelled of fresh-caught fish which my neighbor was grilling over charcoal outside his home. My neighbor, a man named Manuel, spotted me in the dark, raised a hand, and called over the low fence, "Hey John, no power! Come drink cold beer! I have ice!" I stood up, stepped over the low picket fence, and joined his large family sitting on wooden benches right under the open sky. We drank cheap local beer, ate spiced fish with rice directly with our hands off banana leaves, and they asked me about life in America. I told them about snow, towering skyscrapers, and endless highways, while I looked at their smiling faces and thought about how many things in the US we buy with money, yet still fail to buy the most essential thing: simple human warmth. That was the night my American armor cracked for good. I realized that flawless order and meticulous service do not make a person happy. Being known and not being alone does. My joints stopped hurting. The tropical heat and regular ocean swims worked their magic. I threw away half my medications, stopped wearing a watch, and learned to wake with the first rooster crows at dawn. 2 years have passed. If someone met me now at the local market in Dumaguete, they would hardly recognize the reserved, lonely American who flew out of snowy Seattle 3 years ago. My skin has taken on a lasting bronze tan, and I wear light cotton shirts, woven sandals, and a wide-brimmed straw hat. I've learned a couple dozen phrases in Cebuano, and can successfully haggle over fresh tuna or ripe papayas, drawing good-natured laughs from the market women. My home has gradually transformed into a true tropical sanctuary. I hired a local carpenter, and together we built a spacious bamboo terrace looking right out into a garden, where I planted several bushes of that very same sampaguita whose scent pursued me my entire life. Now, every evening, as the scorching heat breaks and a cool breeze blows in from the ocean, the garden fills with that sweet, intoxicating fragrance. I sit in my rocking chair, drinking fresh coconut water straight from the shell, and write in my journal. My children back in the States initially treated my move as an old man's whim. They expected me to tire of the exotic setting within 6 months, grow fed up with the heat and inconvenience, and come back. But last summer, my eldest son Michael flew out to visit with his family. He spent 3 weeks here. For the first few days, he was tense, constantly checking work emails on his phone, wincing at the sight of passing bamboo outrigger boats, and worrying about the water quality. But by the end of the second week, I saw the lines on his forehead smooth out. I watched my grandchildren forget about their tablets, spending whole days running along the sandy shore with local kids, flying handmade paper kites, and learning to jump off bamboo piers into the clear blue water. When we said goodbye at the airport, Michael hugged me tighter than he had since he was a child, and whispered softly, "Dad, I finally understand why you moved. You weren't running away from us. You were just coming back to yourself." Those words were the best confirmation I could have received that I had done the right thing. At 70, it is hard to admit that a large part of your life was lived by someone else's script. In America, I was a good employee, a dutiful taxpayer, a decent neighbor. But here on these distant islands, I became that 10-year-old boy again, someone who knows how to find genuine joy in simple things, a passing sun shower, the taste of sweet mango, a kind word from a passerby, and an endless blue horizon. I recently decided to buy this piece of land and house. Under local laws, foreigners cannot own land outright, but I arranged a long-term 50-year lease with an option to renew. The locals no longer view me as an outsider. To them, I am simply Lolo John, the elderly American neighbor who is always ready to help the local school buy notebooks, treat the kids to ice cream, or sit on a porch bench with the older men discussing the coconut harvest and the coming rainy season. Sometimes in the evening, when an incredible Philippine sunset unfolds over the sea, as the sky paints itself in wild shades of purple, gold, and deep violet, I walk down to the water's edge. The waves softly lap at my bare feet. I look out over the vast expanse of water and think about how strangely full circle human destiny can be. I had to live an entire lifetime, pass through cold, loss, labor, and loneliness, only to travel halfway around the world in my old age and return to the exact same point where it all began. I don't know how many years I have left. 72 is an age where every new day feels like a gift. But I know one thing for certain. Wherever my journey ends, I found what I came for. I found peace, warmth, and the realization that I am finally home. And when my time comes, my ashes will be scattered over this quiet ocean, and I will forever become part of these islands, these palms, and this warm Sampaguita-scented wind.